Hi, everyone. Welcome to Interchange. I'm Dan Jones. Thank you so very much for joining us once again. As always, we have great stuff to talk about this week. It's getting down to the wire in the recall race. Scott Walker still leads in most polls by single digits. We'll talk about what could change in the final days of the campaign. We will talk about reports that the level of violent crime in the city of Milwaukee might be a lot worse than the Milwaukee Police Department claims it is. And we'll discuss the Facebook stock fiasco and whether that's proof positive that there's a different set of rules for the big Wall Street traders than there is for the rest of us. All right, let me introduce everybody. We have Avi Lank with us. He's longtime business reporter for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, now retired. You know Kevin Fisher, former broadcast journalist, political analyst, and oftentimes a fill-in host over on WISN Talk Radio. And Denise Calloway, community affairs and public relations professional. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, the first thing we have to talk about is the governor's race. The two candidates meet at 8 o'clock tonight, Friday, for their debate right here in our studios. Most people think it's going to be a very close race. Most people think the results will hinge on which side is better at getting people to the polls. Is there still time, though, for big surprises, Denise, which could shift the momentum from one side to the other?
I mean, there's always time for surprises, but I think one of the things that we've discovered in this race, no matter whose polling you take a look at, one thing that you find is that those people who very strongly are in favor of Barrett are in favor of Barrett, and those people who really want to support Scott Walker are in favor of Scott Walker. I think we saw that from the primary results, which were, I think, stunning to everybody in terms of the number of folks who came out in a Republican race where there really was no race to vote for Scott Walker. I think people have really made up their minds for the most part. What we're dealing with, what the margin of error is going to be, or what's going to be the margin in this race, I think will really be two things. First, the ability for folks to get out their voters, for Democrats to get their folks out, for Republicans to get their folks out. There's been some national polling that's been done that takes a look at how motivated Republicans and Democrats are in the state to get out the vote. 91% of the Republicans who were polled said they were highly likely to get out and to vote for Walker. Only 83% of Democrats said that. I think that's a problem for Democrats. The other thing will be that very small, narrowing group of people who have not made up their minds. Those two things are going to make the difference in who wins this election.
Kevin, you're a heavy-duty Republican. If all 900,000 people who signed those petitions turn out to vote, do you worry that Walker loses?
No, I don't, because I don't think 900,000 people did sign the recall petitions. There were too many Mickey Mouses and Adolf Hitlers and Elvis Presleys and so forth. I think that for the Democrats to pull this out, to pull the rug out from the Republicans' momentum and lead, they would have to have astronomical numbers that would come out, say, during a presidential race. And then they have a chance to really close the gap. Those independent polls, they're very consistent. They all show a 5, 6, 7% lead. Internal polling, you can't really trust. The Barrett camp has come out with, they say, one of their own polls that shows a narrowing of the race. Well, campaigns do this near the end when they're behind to kind of gin up their supporters as a kind of a directive that we're still in it, don't give up, still give funds, still give your donations. I don't see any, in this case, June surprise happening that would change the momentum or change movement on either side, unless it's a major scandal. And I don't see that happening. I don't see enough movement on the Barrett side for them to pull out a win.
Avi, you have to think that the turnout is going to be huge in this race.
Oh, yeah, I understand. I was talking to someone who filed an absentee ballot in Madison on Tuesday, and he said that there was a 20-minute wait on a Tuesday afternoon in Madison to get in to do absentee voting. That's some indication of turnout, but I agree. I agree with Denise that turnout's going to make a difference. I don't agree with Kevin that there were a lot of false signatures on those petitions, although that's water under the bridge. The one thing we have not mentioned, Kevin's talked about it a little bit, at least alluded to it, we still don't know if the district attorney in Milwaukee County is going to do anything between now and June 5th. I have a feeling that it's awfully late for him to try and indict Walker or more people close to Walker before then. But I suppose
he's had 2 years to do it and has not.
Well,
He's not had the best amount of help from people who have not been cooperative. There have been people who've been arrested for failing to comply with the John Doe investigation. That makes it much harder.
But if we're looking for a surprise, that might be one of them.
And I don't, and even if that happens, which I don't think it will, Scott Walker's been untouched during this whole John Doe. I don't think that in and of itself would be enough to detract enough people for them to leave the Walker camp or jump on the Barrett.
Well, but it might for some people to stay at home,
or it might be enough to energize some people who have decided they're just not going to vote. A couple of whom I also spoke with last week, and they just said they didn't see how it could make a difference. They're both the same. And I suppose in a situation like that, it might. If we're looking for something that might be the surprise that would turn the thing around at the end. But, I'm not willing to concede the election to Mr. Walker.
No, it's not over yet.
I don't think the fat lady's even singing scales in the wings yet.
However,
there's a lot going on.
However, as John Fund wrote in the National Review this week, I think he nailed it in one sentence. He said that Republicans are cautiously optimistic, but Democrats are increasingly gloomy. And the Democrats right now are torn. You have union people quoted as late as today saying that they are frustrated and angry that the White House and the national DNC are staying home and are not bringing millions of dollars from Washington D.C. into Wisconsin, and they're so upset that some of them have said publicly that they have long memories, and if the Obama White House doesn't come in and help, that they will return the favor in the fall and will not campaign as heavily for them.
That's not correct about the National DNC. The National DNC,
they're bringing in ground forces,
no, that's not correct. The National DNC, as late as yesterday, was continuing to do a pretty extensive email blitz to millions and millions of Democrats around the country, asking them to come in and to provide some financial support for the Barrett campaign. So, and Debbie Wasserman, who's the chair of the Democrats, she has actually come in she's actually come out repeatedly in the past couple of weeks to ask for that kind of support.
They're asking others to open their wallets, but they're not popping forth with the money. Here's the thing you have
to remember, and it's really easy, I think, to forget because we've been in this recall mode for so long in this state. Only since the beginning of this month have we had a candidate, a Democratic candidate, who has been able to fully go after Governor Walker. So, Kevin, where I haven't seen the poll where we're talking about a 6% or 7%.
No,
recently.
I haven't either.
What we've been seeing are polls that have been running in the range from 5% to about 3.5%, and favoring Governor Walker. All of them are within the margin of error of the poll.
All of the independent polls.
So I think it shows how tight it is.
All of the independent polls have shown 5. There was a 6.
Not recently.
There was
not recently. Not recently.
There was a Reason poll this week. Granted, it's a libertarian poll. That was an 8. And there was one Republican poll that showed 12.
Would a visit by Obama?
You said you can't trust for Democrats, so you can't really trust it for Republicans.
Would a visit by Obama or Biden or Bill Clinton, would that boost Barrett very much?
Sure, absolutely. It couldn't hurt. Absolutely would help.
I'm not convinced of that because I think here in Wisconsin, this is, and I'm using this word deliberately because we've made it such ourselves, this is our fight. And I don't know that the president coming in to help, quite frankly, would have any more impact than Christie or Haley or any of the other governors who've come in.
But it is telling that he's staying home and not coming to help Tom Barrett. That tells me that even the Democrats, way up high, don't think Barrett's going to win.
I don't think that's the case at all. I don't think that's the case
why is
at all.
He coming
I think that because again, I think this is our fight. It's what we want to be able to do in this state. I don't know that Tom Barrett, to make his point about the issues that he has brought forward very well, and he's articulated very well. Yes, he has, Kevin.
He doesn't have a plan on anything.
Yes, he does.
I'd love to hear it and see it.
I don't think that the points that he's done a really great job of making in terms of,
what's his job creation plan?
In terms of, his job creation.
He has none.
He does have a job creation plan. If you want me to answer a question, then give me the opportunity to answer it and don't keep interrupting me. I know you.
You haven't changed in 3 weeks.
I know you love to do this, but I'm making a good point. But the reality of it is, the issues that Tom Barrett has been able to raise around Governor Walker tell the tale themselves in terms of what people in the state need to hear it from, and quite frankly, who they need to hear it from. And that's from the man who's running against him, not some surrogates.
All right, next topic. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel did a pretty strong investigative piece this week showing that the Milwaukee Police Department has misreported hundreds and hundreds of crimes to the FBI as less serious than they really were. And that quite possibly violent crime isn't going down in the city, but going up. The police department says it is investigating on its own, but that if mistakes were made, they were unintentional, human, clerical, or computer mistakes. Others are wondering if this was an intentional effort to make the city look safer than it is and to make the police chief and mayor look better than they deserve to look. I thought it was an incredibly strong report.
It was, you know, and there are a couple of points about it that I think ought to be said. One is the paper had a fight to get a lot of the data that it used. It still hasn't been able to get the police department to release all of the data that it asked for. On the other hand, what we have is essentially one piece of data that says if we looked at reports for this time period, we find that there's an error rate, either 8 or 16%, depending upon how you want to look at it. The police department says, to their credit, they don't say you're wrong. They say we're going to look at it, but they also say, all right, but what was it before? And what is it in similar cities? You know, what kind of error rates do they have? I think those are legitimate things to ask, and I think the only way we're going to actually get a real answer is for the police department to release all of the information that has been asked for, and for somebody besides the police department to analyze it. I trust the paper to do it. I used to work at the paper, and I know some of the people involved in this investigation, and I think they are honorable people. But you know, let them crunch the data, but let somebody who is not involved with the police department, not involved with the city, maybe even not involved with the state, take a look at it, and take a look also, hopefully, at it for several years, and for other cities of similar size and characteristics. And then we'll be able to see, you know, whether or not there might have been some fudging going on or not. I don't know whether there was some fudging going on. I do know that there's a very strong case been made that there was bad information out there.
You know, I think it's fair to say that Chief Ed Flynn is considered a superstar both locally and nationally in the law enforcement world.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
Oh, you know, they just gave him a new 4-year contract, which is almost unheard of in recent Milwaukee history. And he's also a numbers freak.
Which I've talked about on this program.
Which I find interesting. How could there be this big mistake when the chief is such a numbers freak?
Well, it's because you're watering down the seriousness of the nomenclature. I've had police officers tell me a year and a half ago that this was going on. When you classify armed robberies as thefts from individuals, of course it looks like there's not as much crime, or, hey, look at me, I'm running a great department. The man is obsessed with data, and I think it's unconscionable to do if he's cooking the books. That's a disservice to the city.
It's a very big leap
now. It's a disservice, is it not, to the city and also to the victims of these crimes? And Avi, you're absolutely right. Let an independent panel take these numbers and go at them, as Governor Walker has suggested. I suggest
put them in perspective with other places of the same size.
Fine. And
it's a very big leap from what has been reported to saying somebody's deliberately cooking the books.
I would recommend the Legislative Audit Bureau in Madison, which is one of the best in the country at this kind of investigation. Let them do it.
With all due respect, there's a much better organization than the Legislative Audit Bureau, and it's an organization that the police department, the Milwaukee Police Department, is asked to come in and audit its numbers, and that's the FBI. In months ago, before this report came out in the Journal-Sentinel, the city, the police department, had asked the FBI to come in and audit its numbers.
Yeah, but the police department,
But if you are cooking your numbers, are you going to ask the FBI to come in and take a look at your books? I don't think so. So, I mean, let's kind of talk about what's happening here. There has been some kind of error. At this point in time, there's absolutely no indication that it was anything that was intentional. It appears to be a clerical error. And an error regarding a computer program, some software. Let's take a look at what happened and see and make sure that that is the case, that there was nothing that was intentional. And let's have the FBI, which is already planning to come in and do an audit. It's not of every case, it's of selective cases. Let's have the FBI come in and take a look at that.
I don't think we're in disagreement here, but then if somebody other than the Milwaukee Police Department examines itself, like the LAB in Madison or the FBI, and finds out that, yes, the numbers were doctored, that they were manipulated, then what?
Well, but I'm not sure that an audit like that is going to be able to tell you the numbers were deliberately manipulated. It probably would be able to give you a better idea of the real error in there, the real margin of error statistically. But it's very hard to look at
your
numbers.
Intent is hard to prove.
Okay, that's exactly what.
But if the discrepancies are so wide and so many that it makes it appear that the numbers were fixed to make oneself or one's department look good and make the city look safer than what it really is, that's serious.
I think the only way you absolutely know that is if you have the smoking gun that points to it.
You
have a whistleblower or you have some other kind of information that showed there was deliberate intent to do that.
This reminds me, at one point in my career, when I was working at the paper, I covered a conference that Manpower Incorporated had put together on job figures. And I happened to be sitting next to an Egyptian economist, of all things. And he was curious about how the numbers come out in the United States. And I told him nobody sees them till they come out, except maybe they send them over to the White House the night before. And he said, oh, I understand. So that if they don't like them, they can make sure that they're changed the right way. Now, you're saying that there was manipulation, that there might not have been.
No. I specifically used the word if.
All right.
If the books were cooked, then there's a serious problem.
All right. And let me just say that I know of nobody who has had an independent review of the jobs numbers that were trumpeted by Governor Walker.
We talked about that last week. You're a week too late.
Well, I wasn't here last week, but I'm just saying that.
Neither was I, so go ahead.
We're talking about the police department now.
But we're talking about government numbers released by government sources or government data released by government sources. If you're willing to maybe even countenance that there was a deliberate plan here, I
haven't accused the police chief of anything, but he is a chief who is obsessed with numbers, obsessed with data, to the point where he can't wait to rush to cameras and microphones to show the latest, hey, crime is down, crime is down, crime is down. Well, then, if he's Mr. Numbers guy, then he should do as Denise Calloway says, or as you said, I'm sorry, Avi, release the numbers.
But here's the deal. Here's the deal.
As police chief,
and I would agree with that. As police chief, he's not sitting there entering the data in himself. He's seeing the reports that are coming back. And if there's a clerical or computer software program within that, there's no way for him looking at those numbers to know those numbers are wrong.
The buck stops at the top, Denise.
It does. And I'm not disagreeing with that. But Kevin, I think to say as strongly as you have, even using that small word if, when you're still talking about, a potential cover-up or misdeeds, that I think in order for us to know for certain that this is more than what the police department has said that it has been so far.
For the 80th time, we
have to see where's that smoking gun.
Fine, then let the man who hired Chief Flynn, Tom Barrett, call the FBI and ask them to come.
The FBI's already on the way. Been done.
All right.
Already been done.
Let's talk for just a few minutes about the Facebook stock offering this week. Facebook closed today at about $32 a share, still far below its IPO price of $38 a share. It appears that it was overhyped, overvalued, and misrepresented to the average investor. The whole thing is already an issue in lawsuits and congressional inquiries. Is this just one more thing to justify those who say you shouldn't have any faith in Wall Street? Avi, you know this stuff more than most people.
Well, it's interesting. We've just been talking about numbers and how much you can rely on numbers in two government contexts, because I did bring up the job numbers. And all we can do there is speculate about what might have been the motivation and what's really going on. It's interesting. Here we have in the private world, in private business world, the numbers for earnings for Facebook that the general public appeared to believe were, to use a charitable word, were probably quite optimistic. And this
Very charitable.
What the reaction here says that you really can't run from actual data, right? We don't know. It's in the business world. In the business world, when it turns out that these numbers weren't right, and when it turns out that perhaps some people had a better idea what the real numbers were than others,
that's a problem.
there was a real reaction. The other thing that this shows is that you can have a highly interesting, profitable, creative company, and that doesn't make it a good investment, because the investment is, what is it worth? What are you going to pay for it? And this company, this stock offering, was exquisitely hyped to a lot of people who, as far as I can see, are very, it's very important to them to have the latest piece of technology, you know, the new iPhone, to be right on the cutting edge. Mm-hmm. And buying stock is a lot different than buying an iPhone.
Well,
you know, and there's one other thing we have not mentioned, besides the fact that information may not have gone as generally as it ought to have. The problems that the NASDAQ Stock Exchange had in processing all the orders that followed on this are at least as disturbing as whether or not rules were violated and how information went out.
Some people think that in order for there to be a full financial recovery in this country, people have to have faith in Wall Street once again. I don't see that coming.
No, I think this is not the best timing. Everybody knows Facebook. If you don't know anything else about anything, you do know that Facebook exists and that it's very popular. And there's been a lot of hype about the fact that it was going to be a great investment. That when this IPO was launched, you wanted to be there and you wanted to be part of it. That was the hype around it. But Avi's right. I mean, there are a series of problems that happened here. It was clear that there are some folks who had information that regular investors, like the four of us, did not have access to. And that skewed what happened to the price. It skewed what happened to the number of shares that were bought. And the NASDAQ, the technical problems that it had, there were people who weren't even sure how much stock they had purchased because
at
what price, because of problems with NASDAQ. So I think that what really needs to happen, the chair of the Senate Banking Committee has said, look, what we really need to do is we need to take a look at the way IPOs are actually offered in this country. It's a bit of a helter-skelter process in some ways. Does this cause us to really step back and take a look?
This one was overhyped. There was no way that the numbers could add up, that there'd be this many shares and that the value would be this high. And people should have known, but even so, the ones that didn't have the inside knowledge, I think they can and probably will sue.
Well, they have sued.
Well, we got to go. Oh. Back to the recall election for just a couple of minutes. They say being in politics or even covering it turns you into a cynic. Writing and editing consultant Rick Horowitz isn't sure that's always true, but if it is, at least it prevents sudden shocks to the nervous system. Rick.
Stop the presses! Stop the presses! The Journal Sentinel endorses Scott Walker for governor. Wait a minute. You mean the corporate-leaning editorial board of the corporate cozy Milwaukee Journal Sentinel endorsed the corporate beholden, corporate plaything Scott Walker? What a shock. I'm stunned. Aren't you stunned? Oh, you thought just because the Journal Sentinel has Milwaukee in its name, it would be standing up for Milwaukee and would stand up to Scott Walker, who's been trying to hang on to his job by slamming Milwaukee? Walker's policies are bad enough, but even his language. I mean, it takes a certain kind of guy to actually say out loud in front of the cameras, we don't want to be like Milwaukee, we want to be like Wisconsin. Isn't Milwaukee part of Wisconsin? And wasn't this guy's last job Milwaukee County Executive? Nice to know he cared, huh? But Milwaukee bashing is exactly what lots of you folks in the suburbs love to hear. You do understand that it doesn't go over so well in Milwaukee itself, right? The folks who actually live in Milwaukee don't... Here, wait. Let me put you Walker fan suburbanites over here for a sec, okay? Keep yourselves busy. Just look at the governor at the smiling face. I need to talk to the Milwaukee folks, okay? Okay. All right. Okay. Here's what you need to understand. They don't care about you. Scott Walker and his pals, that is. They don't care about Milwaukee, and they don't even care that you know it. See, the polls all show a really tight race. Walker leading Barrett by a couple of points at most. But what they're counting on... Oh, hang on a second, okay? Everything cool over here? Great. I'll be right back. Okay. Anyway, what they're counting on is turnout. Something like 91% of Republicans say they're definitely going to vote between now and June 5th, but only 83% are Democrats. That's why Walker's folks are smiling. They're thinking they can cut your schools, cut your services, blame you for everything, even Walker's terrible job numbers, and that you won't care enough to do anything about it. You'll just let him steamroll you for another 2.5 years. They may be right, but you get to decide that. They don't. You do. Gotta go. So, what's everybody doing for the weekend? Huh?
Well, thanks, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. Just a quick reminder that the debate between Tom Barrett and Scott Walker takes place at 8 o'clock tonight, Friday, right here in our studios. Be sure to watch. You know it will be interesting. Also, I hope we can all take a few minutes this Memorial Day weekend to remember the many sacrifices made by veterans and their families for us. And then have a wonderful holiday, relaxing weekend.